The night air was cool as Jareth pulled in the clutch and flicked the kill switch. The motorcycle's engine sputtered, then went silent. He coasted for a moment before braking gently and letting the bike roll to a stop. A faint orange glow from a nearby porch light was the only sign of life on the quiet street. He recognized the silver sedan parked a few houses down and gave a small nod. Right on time, he muttered under his breath. Kicking down the side stand, he swung his leg off the bike and stood still for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the dark. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, but otherwise, all was still. He slipped quietly through the gate and moved along the side of the house, careful not to make a sound. Jareth crouched beside the fence, reaching for a piece of wood he'd placed there earlier. His fingers brushed against the rough surface, and he gripped it tightly, testing its weight. Satisfied, he sank back into the shadows to wait. The minutes passed slowly, but he didn't have to wait long. Water started running somewhere inside the house. He listened intently, the sound of a shower. "Good," he whispered. His pulse stayed calm, steady. A moment later, the front door creaked open. The porch light stayed off, a stroke of luck. He watched as a man stepped outside, closing the door behind him, unaware of the danger waiting in the dark. The man, stocky, mid-40s, a bit careless in the way he moved, took only 2 steps before Jareth struck. The first blow hit squarely across his knees. The man let out a muffled groan and staggered back, confused more than hurt. Jareth didn't hesitate. He swung again, harder this time, and the wood cracked against the man's face. The sound was dull and final. The man crumpled to the ground without another word. Jareth breathed out slowly, his expression unreadable. Working with eerie precision, Jareth began breaking each joint, arms, legs, elbows, knees. The thuds were sickening, the movements methodical. It wasn't rage that fueled him. It was something colder, something planned. When the final pop of a knee echoed through the yard, he paused briefly, almost surprised by the sound. Then he stepped back, breathing deeply, his face pale under the dim light. The man lay motionless, unconscious and beyond help. Jareth made sure not to touch the head, ribs, or anything that might leave obvious clues. 2 minutes later, he was gone, disappearing into the night on his motorcycle. Far away, another man, Leo Dre, was driving home when the distant wail of an ambulance broke through his thoughts. The flashing blue lights passed him, cutting through the night, heading in the same direction he was going. "Strange," he murmured, following it instinctively. The closer he got to his street, the stronger his unease grew. When he turned the final corner, his stomach dropped. His home, his quiet, ordinary home, was surrounded by police cars, their lights flickering against the windows. Uniformed officers crowded the garden. He slammed his car door shut and ran toward the house. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. One officer stepped forward to stop him, but Leo dodged past, his voice rising with panic. And where are you? What happened?" His eyes darted between the flashing lights and the medics carrying someone on a stretcher. "Who's that? Why is he on my doorstep?" Another officer blocked his way. "Sir, please calm down," the man said firmly. Leo glared. "Calm down? My house is full of cops, my wife is missing, and there's a bleeding stranger outside my front door. You call that calm?" The officer's jaw tightened. "Sir, your wife is safe. She's inside being interviewed." For a moment, Leo froze. "She's all right." "Yes, sir." Relief hit him like a wave. "Thank God," Leo muttered, pushing past the officer before he could stop him. He hurried into the house, with another constable following close behind. Inside the living room, and sat on the couch, pale and trembling, flanked by 2 detectives in plain clothes. Leo's voice cracked as he demanded, "What's going on, and why is there a half-dead man outside our house?" And broke down crying before she could answer. One of the detectives raised a hand. "Mr. Dre, please calm yourself." Leo spun toward him. "Calm myself? I just came home to find chaos in my house and blood on my doorstep. You tell me to calm down?" The older detective cleared his throat. "At 11:49, we received a call reporting an assault at this address. When our officers arrived, They found a man unconscious. The assailant had already fled. Leo blinked, struggling to process. "You think I did this?" he asked incredulously. "Where were you around that time?" the detective asked, pen ready. "Driving home from work. Near the A605, maybe." He turned toward and, his eyes narrowing. "Was he here for you?" and covered her face, and began sobbing harder. "You were with him, weren't you?" Leo shouted. "You were sleeping with that man," and cried harder, saying nothing. The room fell silent except for her muffled sobs. Leo exhaled sharply and turned back to the detective. "Well, whoever did it saved me the trouble. Tell him I owe him a drink." The detective frowned. "Sir, that's not funny." "Neither is coming home to find the circus," Leo retorted. "Now, if you're done accusing me, I'm going for a shower." "We'll need to check you for blood, sir," the officer replied. Leo raised an eyebrow. "You think I'd beat a man to death and come home to shower? Go ahead then, check." He pulled off his boots and shirt defiantly, standing there in his socks and boxers. "Satisfied?" he asked, glaring. The officer sighed. "Please, sir, put your clothes back on." Leo snorted.
"Why?"
"So you can arrest me later and make me take them off again? Forget it." He turned toward the cabinet, poured himself a large glass of whiskey, and downed it in one gulp. "Sir, we need you to stop drinking," the detective said. "You need," Leo said bitterly. "I needed a faithful wife. I needed peace in my own home. But here we are." He poured another drink, his hands trembling slightly, and soft sobs filled the living room, a quiet counterpoint to Leo's rising anger. He poured another glass, ignoring the detective's warning glance. "I don't care what you people need," he muttered, swallowing the whiskey in a single gulp. "I needed to come home to someone I could trust." His voice broke, but he steadied it quickly. "Now all I've got is a house full of strangers and a wife who can't even look me in the eye." He stared into the glass, watching the amber liquid swirl before refilling it again. "You think you can question me now? Go ahead. But I'm not saying another damn word until I've had my shower." He turned abruptly and started walking toward the hallway. The younger officer stepped forward. "Sir, you can't just leave." Leo didn't stop. "Watch me." He walked to the sideboard, grabbed the whiskey bottle, and poured another generous measure. "You'll regret that, sir," the detective said, but Leo just lifted his glass and toasted them mockingly. "To you all doing your job so well." He drank again, the bitterness burning down his throat. The detective leaned toward his partner, whispering something urgent. Leo smiled faintly as he saw them exchanging worried looks. "Go on, talk," he muttered. "You've all got theories, haven't you?" "Sir, we're asking you not to drink any more," the older officer repeated. "You're going to be questioned soon." "Questioned," Leo repeated, his tone dripping sarcasm. "You know what I should be? Comforted."
"But no."
"I get suspicion, flashing lights, and you lot pawing around my living room like bloodhounds." He set his glass down with a sharp clink. "Now, if you don't mind, I'll do what I came home to do." Without waiting for a reply, he strode toward the stairs. From the couch and whispered, "Leo, pleased," he paused halfway up but didn't look back. "Don't, and just don't." He climbed the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down on his chest. Just before reaching the top, a voice stopped him. "Sir, please wait." It was a woman's voice, soft yet firm. He turned to see a forensic technician in a yellow coverall. "We need to check you for any signs of a struggle," she said. "I've already been checked by half your department," he replied coldly. "Still, it's procedure." With visible irritation, Leo lifted his arms, allowing her to inspect his hands and arms for bruises or cuts. "Satisfied?" he asked.
"For now," she said.
"You can get cleaned up." In the bedroom, the stench of betrayal hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't just perfume. It was something raw, intimate. The sheets were tangled, the air thick with a sour mixture of sweat and guilt. His stomach twisted. "You've got to be kidding me," he murmured. Rage surged through him. Grabbing the stained mattress, he yanked it off the bed and dragged it downstairs, step by thudding step. Out on the front lawn, The neighbor's curtains twitched as he flung it onto the grass. Then he went back upstairs, flung the window open, and began throwing Anne's clothes out, one handful at a time. "Mr. Dre," an officer shouted from below. Leo ignored him and kept throwing. Dresses, shoes, handbags. All of it went flying out into the night. "Mr. Dre, please stop," came the voice again. He turned sharply, gripping a blouse in one hand. "Why?" he snapped. "They're hers. She can have them." The officer climbed partway up the stairs. "Sir, we need a statement from you." "A statement?" Leo scoffed. "I already gave you one. I didn't do it." "We still need you to come with us," the man insisted. Leo smirked. "Unless you're arresting me, I'm not going anywhere." The officer hesitated. "Mr. Dre, please, let's not make this difficult." "Too late," Leo said flatly. "You lot already made it difficult." He tossed the last of Anne's belongings out the window and folded his arms. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got better things to do than entertain your suspicions." The officer's patience finally cracked. "Mr. Dre, you're leaving me no choice." "Oh, here we go," Leo muttered. The officer drew a breath and recited the words with mechanical precision. "Leo Dre, you're under arrest on suspicion of assaulting Mr. Daniel Cross." Leo blinked, then gave a slow, amused grin. "Is that so? Well, detective, I suppose congratulations are in order. You've finally figured out how to read your lines." He turned, pulled on a pair of jeans and a plain t-shirt, and held out his hands mockingly. "Shall we?" The officer didn't reply, simply escorted him out the front door. As they passed the living room, Leo stopped briefly and looked at Anne. "Happy now," he said, his tone cold as ice. "Pack your things, Anne. You can sleep in the mess you've made." Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. Two officers placed Leo in the back of the patrol car. As the vehicle pulled away, the younger one in the front seat broke the silence. "You really did a number on that guy." Leo's head snapped up. "What did you just say?" "Just saying, if someone did what he did to me, I'd probably do the same," the officer muttered. Leo's jaw tightened. "If I'd known about it sooner," he said through gritted teeth, "he wouldn't have walked away at all." The officer glanced back but didn't respond. The rest of the ride passed in silence, punctuated only by the wail of distant sirens. At the station, Leo was processed, fingerprinted, and left in a small interview room. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly above his head. He rested his arms on the table, his head drooping. Every time he closed his eyes, footsteps echoed in the hall. The door creaked open, and the detective from earlier, the one with the sharp tongue, stepped in. "Mr. Dre," he said curtly. "Ready to talk now?" Leo lifted his head slowly. "You've already decided I'm guilty," he said. "So go ahead. Let's waste each other's time." The detective sat opposite, pressing the record button. "Let's start from the top," he said. The detective leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You were seen arriving home minutes after the assault," he said. "You expect me to believe that's a coincidence?" Leo met his gaze calmly. "You ever follow an ambulance home?" The detective frowned. "What?" "That's what I did. It overtook me on Huntington Road. I followed it all the way here," Leo replied evenly. "When I arrived, my house was lit up like a disco. And now here we are." The detective tapped his pen against the table, unimpressed. "Convenient story." "Not as convenient as my wife's lover lying on my doorstep," Leo muttered, his voice dripping with contempt. The detective switched on the recorder. "For the record, this interview begins at 4:57 a.m. Detective Brand's small questioning Leo Dre regarding aggravated assault and grievous bodily harm." He recited the caution and then looked up. "You're also being considered for attempted murder." Leo gave a low whistle. "You don't do half measures, do you? Where were you between 11:30 and midnight?" "Driving home from Newcastle," Leo said, slow and deliberate. "I told you that already." "Any proof?" "If you listened instead of talked, you'd know the answer," Leo snapped. "But sure, I can prove it." Detective Small's eyes narrowed.
"How?"
Leo leaned back in his chair. "I've got a signed delivery note, date, time, everything. Says I was in Newcastle at 7:30. "That's not proof of where you were at midnight," the detective said sharply. You could have driven back, done the job, then staged your return. Leo smiled faintly. 250 miles in under 4 hours, with traffic and cameras? Impressive, even for me. The detective began scribbling something down, clearly calculating. Don't hurt yourself, Leo added dryly. You're already red enough in the face. Detective Small slammed his pen on the table. You think this is funny? A little, Leo admitted. If you had an ounce of sense, you'd see this whole thing's absurd. I didn't beat that man. Someone else did. Someone who probably wanted to do me a favor. That's not how justice works, Small growled. Then maybe you should redefine justice, Leo replied. Because right now it looks a lot like stupidity in uniform. The detective's jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. You're walking on thin ice, Dre. Good, Leo said softly. I like the sound it makes when it cracks. They stared at each other for several seconds. Finally, Small took a deep breath and said, Interview suspended. He stood abruptly, left the room, and slammed the door behind him. Leo chuckled under his breath, resting his head on his folded arms. Sleep came in fits, broken by the buzz of voices in the hallway and the clatter of doors. When the detective returned 10 minutes later, his expression had changed, calmer but colder. You knew my calculations were off, didn't you? Small muttered. Leo grinned. Took you long enough to figure that out. Small glared at him. You enjoy mocking the police, don't you? Only the ones who make it so easy, Leo said. Look, detective, I didn't touch that man. Check my hands, check my boots, check my van, it's all clean. You're remarkably confident for someone under arrest. I'm remarkably tired, Leo corrected. I've been awake for 25 hours, humiliated, interrogated, and accused of attempted murder. Forgive me if I'm not in the mood to cry about it. The detective stared at him for a long moment, then finally said, You're free to go. For now. The paperwork took longer than the release itself. Leo signed a few forms, collected his wallet and keys, and walked out into the early morning light. The world looked strange, quieter somehow. He wasn't sure if it was relief or exhaustion that made his steps feel heavy. Back at home, and opened the door before he could knock. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from crying. Leo, I'm so sorry, she whispered. It was a mistake. He stared at her blankly. Mistake? That's what we're calling it now. It was the first time, she said quickly. It meant nothing. Then you won't mind when it ends, he replied coldly, brushing past her. He went straight upstairs, stripped, and stood under the shower until the water turned cold. Thoughts swirled in his mind, fragments of the night before, of flashing lights, of Anne's trembling voice. First time, he murmured bitterly. Always the first time, right before the second. When he finished, he dried off slowly, took a long breath, and decided on his next move. Lawyer, he muttered. He needed one, but it was Saturday. Still, he'd look online and see what he could find. But first, there was one more thing he wanted to do, something that had been gnawing at him since dawn. He dressed quietly and walked downstairs. And was in the kitchen, 2 mugs of coffee on the table. I made you one, she said softly. Thanks, he replied flatly, taking a sip. The bitterness matched his mood perfectly. Who is he asked suddenly. Anne's hand froze halfway to her lips. No one, she said. I mean, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, Leo said, his voice low but sharp. She looked away, tears filling her eyes. His name's Dan. Dan Stubbs. Leo gave a short, humorless laugh. Of course it is. He walked over to the phone and dialed the hospital. Good morning, he said calmly when someone answered. I'm calling about a patient, Daniel Stubbs. Could you tell me how he's doing? I'm sorry, sir. We can't give out patient details. Leo smiled faintly. Of course. Is his wife there by any chance? Yes, sir, Mrs. Stubbs is with him. Would you like me to put her on?
Please, Leo said.
He could almost hear the echo of footsteps before a woman's voice came on the line. Hello, this is Julia Stubbs. Who is this? My name's Leo Dre, he said smoothly. And I think you and I have something in common. There was a pause on the other end. Julia's voice came back cautious but curious. Something in common?
What are you talking about?
Leo leaned against the counter, his voice low. Your husband and my wife. They seem to have been close. Silence followed, thick and heavy. Then Julia spoke, her tone trembling. Close? I don't understand. Leo chuckled quietly. Sure you do. But if you want to confirm it, you're welcome to visit. My wife, and would be more than happy to explain everything. Julia hesitated. Why would I want to meet your wife? Because some things are better discussed in private, Leo replied. Not in a hospital room full of pity. On the other end of the line, Julia took a shaky breath. Give me your address, she said suddenly. Leo raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? I'm sure, she answered, her voice turning cold. I'll be there soon. Good, he said softly. I'll put the kettle on. And had been standing behind him the whole time, pale and trembling. When Leo hung up, she found her voice. Leo, what did you just do? He turned slowly, his expression calm but chilling. Invited the truth over for tea. You can't, she whispered. You can't do this. I already did, he said simply. Now go make yourself presentable. Minutes later, the screech of tires tore through the quiet street. Leo smiled faintly. Right on time. He opened the door before Julia could knock. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed red, but there was fire behind them. Is it true? She demanded. Was my husband here? And stood frozen in the hallway, her lips trembling. Please, I can explain, she started, but Julia's hand shot up. Don't you dare lie to me. Her voice echoed through the house. You have to understand, and stammered. We didn't mean for it to happen. Julia took a step closer, eyes burning. You didn't mean to? You call betrayal an accident.
Anne sobbed.
It wasn't planned. You could have said no. Julia cut in, her voice trembling with rage. You could have remembered you were married. He could have remembered too. But instead, you chose this. And covered her face, crying harder. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Julia spat. You wanted something forbidden. And now you'll live with it. For a moment, silence filled the room except for Anne's sobs. Then Julia turned to Leo. Your husband did a fine job, she said coldly. He'll need care for the rest of his life. I suppose that's justice in a way. Leo smirked faintly. Just to be clear, he said, if I had done it, he wouldn't still have his private parts. Julia blinked, surprised, then gave a dry laugh. Fair enough. She drew in a slow breath and nodded. Coffee then, he asked. She hesitated, then said, please. They left and, in the living room, slumped on the couch and went into the kitchen. For a while, the two betrayed souls sat opposite each other, mugs steaming between them. So, Julia said, breaking the silence, how long were they together? No idea, Leo said. Long enough to make a fool of us both. They talked for almost an hour, about deceit, broken trust, and the quiet ache that comes when love rots from the inside. Julia wiped her eyes more than once, and even Leo's anger softened briefly. Funny thing, he said. I used to think marriage meant something sacred. Julia gave a small, sad smile. So did I. From the living room, they could hear Anne pacing, sobbing quietly to herself. Neither paid her any mind. People always say time heals everything, Julia murmured. But I think time just teaches you who not to trust. You're probably right, Leo replied. When the coffee was gone and the silence stretched too long, Julia stood. I should go, she said softly. Thank you for the truth. Leo followed her to the door. Take care of yourself, he said. And don't worry about your husband. He's got plenty of time to think about what he's done. She nodded, eyes glistening. You too, Leo. He watched her walk to her car and drive off. For a moment, he felt something close to peace. Then he turned and saw the mattress still lying in the backyard, a grotesque reminder of everything broken. He went out, dragged the mattress around to the back garden, and began piling Anne's clothes and belongings on top of it. She appeared at the doorway, pale and desperate. Leo, please don't, she begged. Don't burn my things. He didn't look up. Got a light, he asked. Not the red one you hang outside when I'm not here. Her eyes widened in horror. No, please, Leo, I'm sorry. I love you. He finally turned to face her. You love me now? After all this? No, and you loved the excitement, the thrill of sneaking around.
You didn't love me.
Tears streamed down her face. I didn't think you'd find out, she whispered.
Exactly, he said.
You didn't think.
Not about me.
Not about us. Just about yourself. He pointed toward the gate. Pick up your stuff and get out before I throw you on the pile with it. Anne's voice cracked. Where will I go? Anywhere that isn't here, Leo said coldly. He turned back to the mattress, doused it in lighter fluid, and struck a match. The flames caught instantly, orange tongues devouring the fabric, and let out a strangled sob as smoke rose into the evening air. When the fire burned low, Leo stood watching it, arms folded, the light flickering across his face. 14 months, he murmured to himself. That's how long it'll take for this to stop hurting. He was wrong, but it sounded convincing enough in the silence. In time, the papers came through, the divorce finalized, the past officially ended. Anne's twins were born 6 months later. They weren't his and he didn't care. Daniel Stebbs, now known as Pastor Dan, was still struggling to walk, his life forever altered. As for Detective Small, he never did find the real assailant. Leo rarely thought about that night anymore, but sometimes when he heard the faint wail of an ambulance in the distance, a cold memory crept back. He'd stare out the window, a glass of whiskey in hand, and wonder if justice had been served or merely disguised. The police still called occasionally, asking if he'd remembered anything new. He always gave the same answer. No, it wasn't a lie, not exactly. He remembered everything, every sound, every face, every heartbeat of that night. But some truths, he decided, were better left to rest in silence. And never came back. Not once. He saw her name once or twice in local gossip, and Dre now and Stevens, someone had said, but he never cared enough to ask more. The house stayed quiet after that. He replaced the mattress, repainted the walls, and boxed up everything that reminded him of her. What he didn't throw away, he burned. Ashes are cleaner, he told himself one night as the smoke curled up into the sky. Still, no amount of fire could cleanse the hollow ache in his chest. One evening, months later, Leo ran into Julia outside a cafe. She was dressed simply, her hair pulled back, her face calmer than he remembered. Julia, he said, surprised. Leo. Her tone was warm, almost gentle. They stood awkwardly for a moment before she gestured toward a table. Coffee. He smiled faintly. You and your coffee. It helps, she said. They sat for a while, talking about ordinary things, work, the weather, life after betrayal. The heaviness between them had lifted, replaced by quiet understanding. As they finished their drinks, Julia leaned back, studying him. You know, she said, I never asked, do you know who really did it? Leo met her gaze steadily. I have an idea, he said softly. Someone who doesn't take betrayal lightly. Did you ever thank them? She asked, half joking. He gave a small, tired smile. In my own way. Julia nodded, a trace of sympathy in her eyes. Maybe that's enough. They said their goodbyes, promising to keep in touch, but deep down, both knew they probably wouldn't. Some wounds were better left untouched. Back home, Leo stood in the garage, staring at the empty space where his old bike used to be. The Hayabusa, sleek, fast, and impossible to trace. He ran a hand along the dusty shelf, his mind drifting to a conversation he'd had long ago. If anyone ever hurts you, his friend Stu had said, just say the word. Leo had laughed at the time. You and your hero complex. Not a hero, Stu had replied. Just loyal. Now, as the pieces aligned, Leo smiled faintly. Loyalty came in many forms, and sometimes it came wearing a helmet. He remembered the night clearly, Stu showing up with that same motorcycle, grinning like the devil. Trade for the night?
Stu had asked.
Leo had nodded. No questions. No explanations. Just a silent exchange, two men understanding what needed to be done. Stu rode off into the night, and Leo took the van toward Newcastle, leaving behind an alibi that would hold. When he returned home hours later, the damage was already done. The streets flashing blue, his wife crying in the living room. Everything had gone according to plan. He'd never told anyone the truth. Not even Stu. They never spoke about it again. It was the kind of secret that sat quietly between them, unspoken but understood. Whenever they met, usually at the pub, sharing silent drinks, their eyes would meet for a moment, and that was enough. No words needed. The police kept chasing shadows, but they never came close. And Leo made sure of that. Sometimes he even gave them tips, meaningless ones just to watch them spin in circles. Years passed. The anger faded, replaced by something heavier but calmer, acceptance. Leo wasn't proud of what had happened, but he wasn't sorry either. He deserved it, he would whisper sometimes, not sure if he was trying to convince himself or the ghosts that haunted the house. The nights were quiet now, but occasionally, he'd wake to the sound of a motorcycle revving faintly in the distance. It always made him smile. Stu was out there somewhere, still riding, still free, still loyal. Life moved on, as it always does. Leo sold the house eventually, packed his few remaining things, and left the city behind. He bought a small cottage by the coast, where no one knew his name or his story. The sea was loud there, and that suited him fine. On good days, he'd walk along the cliffs with a flask of coffee and watch the waves crash below. On bad days, he'd pour himself a drink and stare at the horizon until the bottle was empty. Either way, the silence felt cleaner than before. Sometimes, at sunset, he'd think about everything that had happened. The lies, the violence, the fire. He knew the world wasn't built on fairness, only choices. And his choice, however dark, had given him peace. Maybe that's enough, he'd murmur as the sky turned red. Then he'd raise his glass toward the fading light and whisper, "Here's to loyalty." The wind would carry the words away, lost somewhere between the sea and the stars. But in that quiet, lonely moment, Leo Dre finally felt free. Please like, comment, and do not forget to subscribe.